Welcome everybody to CSL in session here in the last week of November. We will be getting started here in just a moment, but before we do, if you would like to take a moment and introduce yourself in the chat area, feel free to do so. It's always interesting to see who's logging in and where you all are from. There are two worksheets that you can download. They're available directly from Adobe Connect underneath where all of your names are showing up. If you click on the two files, you should get a download prompt. Also in the chat area, I put a link to the CSL in Session website, and you can download them from there as well. Also, before we get started, and I forgot to introduce myself, my name is Christine Krieger, and I am the Professional Development Consultant for the Colorado State Library. And I want to take just a moment to introduce you to CSL in session in case you haven't attended before. For many of you, you may be used to attending webinars where somebody talks at you for an hour, especially during the lunch hour, and you kind of zone out. But we're going to shake things up a little bit today and have you guys do some activities to help increase your learning and to share some of the thoughts and ideas that you all have as well. So hopefully this will be an enjoyable experience for you all. The main way that you all will be participating today will be via chat. So those of you who have introduced yourself, that's where you're going to be chatting. We'll have another kind of breakout chat that will tell you what to do with when we reach that point. And we may have you raise your hand. You'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, there's some icons, including a man or character. I guess it could be a man or a woman. And you can, there's a little drop-down arrow, and you can raise your hand or say agree or disagree, those kinds of things. And then lastly, if by chance you are having any audio issues, one, we are recording today's session, and it'll be available on the CSL in Session website probably within an hour after today's session. But if you hover over where it says Colorado State Library at the top, you can also send me a private chat, and I can help you work through a few things just in case. So that is what we're going to do today. So I will go ahead now and introduce our speaker for today. We have Miranda Doran Myers, who is a research assistant at the Colorado State Library, and she is here to talk about speaking finance.
All right, thank you, Christine. Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming today. I appreciate you taking some time during your lunch to talk about just a way to insert some numbers and think about how to communicate the value that your library has to different groups within your community. So just to introduce myself, I'm a librarian. I work for the Colorado State Library for the Library Research Service. So we deal a lot with library data and statistics. And not to brag, but I took Econ 101, pass-fail when I was a sophomore in college, and passed it. So clearly, as you can see, I am not an economic genius or really a marketer. So you might be wondering why I became interested in kind of this idea of inserting some marketing and financial strategies into your marketing. So I first became interested in this idea when I started my job at the state library working with data and statistics, because I really started to notice that good marketing sort of hinges on the data that you collect and the information that you can gather about the people that you're trying to target with your marketing strategies. So really, marketing is all about collecting data and using that information to get a good handle on the best way to promote your library and your library services. And I think that it really answers kind of that question at the heart of marketing, which is why should the people in your community care about your library? And sometimes that answer is going to be that they are going to care about the financial value or the financial benefit that your library is going to give to your community. I think a lot of marketing that librarians use oftentimes look like this. It's a lot of smiling faces. We focus on, early literacy programs or stories or anecdotes about people who have gone to the library and it has helped them learn to read, provided them with a community. We really focus on sort of the intrinsic value that people find in libraries, but a lot of times those stories don't hit home with some people in the community that we're trying to target, especially those people who are making decisions about the funding or the resources that the library is getting. So no matter how many times you tell them that a baby learned how to read, or um, a senior citizen went to the library and found a community and it improved their quality of life, the smiling faces aren't going to really impact them. So we're not going to use these smiling faces anymore. We're going to, in this presentation, think about a way that we could talk to the people who really just care about the financial bottom line, or who are going to be more concerned with the taxes, whether they're paying taxes, and how to communicate the library's value to them from kind of that perspective. So we're going to sort of try to shift our marketing and be better able to speak their language, so speak the financial language. So in order to do that, we're going to spend the first part of this presentation talking about this concept called return on investment. So that is something that's really basic. It's an easy way to start thinking about your library from a financial perspective, and sort of create a marketing plan that can hinge on that, using return on investment as a focal point for your library. So then in the second part, we'll go through a couple steps towards developing a marketing campaign or a marketing strategy where you can use this idea of return on investment and think about how it can be used for your library and for different types of stakeholder groups that you're trying to reach out to. So I'll just ask this question first. What does everybody think of when they hear the term ROI, or return on investment? You can write in the chat box, or
So we're having several different ideas come through: value for the money spent, what we get for the money. People are typing now faster than I can read. What did it cost me? What do I get in return?
Yeah, I think all of you have a pretty good idea of what this term means, which is great. So yeah, it is pretty self-explanatory when you think about like the words return on investment. So it's basically just the money you get for the money that you invest into something. So this is a very traditional business term. So companies will often use it when they're thinking about investing their money into a product, or into their own marketing campaigns. So I think the easiest way to think about it is the stock market. So if you put in $1, how much are you getting back off of that investment? So, if you invested into Apple in the 80s when their stock was really cheap, you would get this huge return on investment. And companies usually think about this in terms of a percentage. So they would think about getting a 40% return on investment. But today we're going to think about it as more of a ratio, like a 1-to-4 or a 4-to-1. So you'll get $4 back, like in the picture that is being shown right now, for every $1 that you invest. So even though this is a very traditional business term, we can also use that to sort of put a value onto the services that are provided by the library. And return on investment, it's a really good way to demonstrate the worth of a library in terms of dollars and cents, rather than the intrinsic value that librarians or some other people in the community often use to put a measure on library value. So basically, you could say that you invest $1 into the library using your taxes. I like to use the word invest rather than I paid my taxes to the library. So we invested $1, and then we can use a couple different strategies to figure out how much money that we're going to get back from that. And then before I dive into how we measure return on investment, I'll just go over quickly what is not return on investment. So economic impact is influenced by the return on investment that people get from their library, but that has more to do with the value that a community realizes because a library has influenced their business development, has helped job creation, or has increased their neighborhood value. There are a lot of different ways that a library can affect the economics of a community, and I do think that those are really powerful bits of information and data to put into a marketing campaign. So if you are interested in that, I've included a link to the ALA website that kind of goes over that aspect of the economic impact of libraries. So please visit that if you think that that is something that would be useful to you and your library. So even though things like economic impact are really important, I have decided to focus on return on investment because I think it's a really powerful way to help people shift their thinking about the library. So rather than thinking about the library as something that's sort of a drain on the town's resources or just takes up a bunch of tax money, it's just a way to reframe it to help people think about the library as more of an investment in their community. That's something that they are getting value off of, not something that is taking value, like taking their money away. It's something that is helping them gain money. And I just want to really hammer this term, investment. We have to really think about the library as an investment for the community. So before I go on to talking about how we calculate return on investment for a library, does anybody have any questions so far? All right, I don't see anybody typing, so I'll move forward. So we can calculate ROI for our library using two main sets of data. So we're going to focus most on market value data because that is just a really quick and easy way to get started using return on investment, but I'll also touch on contingent valuation a little bit later if that's something that you might be interested in. So market value data is basically placing a dollar value on the services that most libraries provide. So these are based on objective real world values. So for this, an adult book could be assigned a value based on the average cost of a book on Amazon, because that's a very common place people will go to buy their books. So in this case, an adult book would be about $17. So that is how much it would have cost for somebody to go buy a book rather than getting that book from the library. So does anybody have a guess about a children's book? How much that might cost if it wasn't being provided by the library or people couldn't get it for free? Yeah, we see $7, about 10. Yeah, these are all good guesses. So it's actually also $17, which surprised me a lot. That I thought it would be less expensive than an adult book, but when it has been averaged out, it comes out to be about $17. How about for the rest? Interlibrary loan or the computer use per hour or a movie? How much would you guess that those cost? All right, so a movie might be $12 or $10. Yeah, so some of these values were actually pretty surprising to me when I went through and was looking at them. So an interlibrary loan is about $25. The way they calculate that would be the cost of a book plus shipping. The computer use is $12 an hour, which is much more expensive than I thought, but that is what FedEx or Kinko's would charge for use of one of their computers. And a movie is $4, which was surprising to me too, because I was thinking about it in terms of going to go see a movie, but they actually calculate it based on a Netflix download or Netflix subscription, which is much, much cheaper than going to go see a movie. So we can get the market value data by using some of the market value calculators that are available. So I got this information from the Massachusetts Library Association, and I liked their calculator because it's very, very general data based on sort of national services, except for, their newspaper. You might want to, if you're going to use something like this, think about your own newspapers or other local subscription costs. So it's important to know how you got your numbers when you're doing this and have that data readily available when you're going to use return on investment as part of a marketing strategy. So market value data is a very conservative way to estimate your library value. You're thinking about this only in terms of the market value of services provided. So if you wanted to kind of add on to that and get a more comprehensive view of the value that your library provides to your community, you could also get into something called contingent valuation. And that is basically placing a value on resources that don't have an objective market value. So a good way to think about this, it's very, very specific for your own community, and you would have to go through and kind of survey your own patrons to see how much they value their library. But a good way to think about it is thinking about how much would a patron lose if the library didn't exist. So if they didn't have all of these resources in one place, or what would a child lose if they didn't have access to hundreds of books over the course of their childhood. So there are a lot of different ways to think about this. So if you are interested in doing a contingent valuation study for your library and want to get more resources about that, you can visit this website where I've put a lot of different resources that we'll talk about today. But there are a few studies in there that can show you how to kind of go through that process. So even though these library value calculators are a bit of a conservative estimate, I think that the numbers that they provide are very, very powerful. So Christine has asked the question in the chat box, has anybody here used an ROI calculator for your library before? You could maybe, I don't know if we can use the yes, no, Christine, or the agree or disagree.
If people want to respond in chat, or you can use the little guy up at the top to raise your hand. Either way, looks like people are kind of typing it in a little bit. So Anna said that she's used it a while ago, but hasn't used it lately. I worked for the Arapahoe Library District several years ago, and for a while we had one on the website. So
yeah, I've seen a lot of different libraries that will have that embedded in their website, which I think is a good way for patrons to be able to go in and see how much value they are getting from their library.
And even if your library is not using it, it might be fun to just pick one of them and fill it out for yourself, because it saves me oodles of dollars. I use my library all the time. So
yeah. Yeah. So these library calculators, they are kind of based off of public library services. The ALA calculator, that's the one that is based off of the Massachusetts State Library. So those are very general, kind of national averages. So it's not very specific to your own community, but it's a good way to kind of start off and get some numbers. The Maine State Library Value Calculator is actually really great because you can go into their spreadsheet and customize your own values. And then you can embed that onto your website and have patrons go in and look at it and see how much they're saving by using the library, because people who are going to the library website have already saved some money if they're looking for resources there. All right, so I'll just go through a quick example of how we can use an ROI calculator or a library value calculator to figure out the return on investment of a particular patron or of an average patron for your library. So let's just imagine that we're going to use the library value calculator from the ALA to find out the return on investment of a patron that has done the following: checked out 6 adult books, 8 children's books, an audiobook, used the library computer for 2 hours, attended 1 program, maybe 2 story times, and used the meeting room for 1 hour. And then they also, over the course of the year, $75 out of their tax money for the city has gone to the library. So like I said, we like to say invested $75 into the library. So it's very, very easy to go through. You just click on the link, fill out all of these values. Very, very straightforward. And then it spits out this number, and that is the overall value of the services that that the library has provided you over the past year. And so this is especially powerful when we combine it with the money that people have invested into the library. So if we get this number that this particular patron has received a value of $325.95, we'll narrow that down to a ratio. So we'll divide it, their value of their services divided by the tax money that they've invested to get this ratio for that they have received $4.34 of total value on every $1 that they have invested into the library, which actually is a pretty huge return on their investment. If you think about the stock market example, if you invested $1 into the stock market and quadrupled your money, that's a pretty huge return on your investment. So I think most people are happy if they get 25% off of the money that they've invested, or even double their money. That would be great. So these are really powerful numbers. All right. So does anybody have questions about this process or using an ROI calculator? Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, there are a lot of different ROI calculators available, and some of them are very specific to a community, but some are really general, and they're so easy to use. Oh yeah, so a return on investment for non-users would be a difficult thing to calculate because I guess you could use the return on investment that um, that an average patron would use to kind of um, come up with a marketing strategy that could help them see what they could gain from using the library. But I think that that would have more to do with a broader economic impact so that they could see how their neighborhood value increases, or how the library is benefiting their community in many other ways to figure out that return on investment. It would be a little bit more difficult to do. It wouldn't be quite as straightforward as this, but if you looked into some of the more economic impact resources, it would be a really great thing to figure out, and I would be happy to talk about that too afterwards. All right, sorry, let me go through and read the question. Yeah, and from Curtis again, a version that has general metrics on community impact. I think also you could look at the website that I provided through the ALA, and I'm not sure if they've come up with a calculator, but that would be a great project to make that an easier process. And yeah, from Anna about is there a good way to leverage return on investment for donations? Right, extra gifts are very hard to get. If you were approaching a stakeholder group or a group that you're trying to get a gift from and present the return on investment that people already get from the tax money that they invest in, I do think that there's a way that you could use this concept to convince them that you'd be using their money in a really smart way and that the impact of their gift could, in the example you used, quadruple, so that their gift could have a much bigger impact than just the money that they are giving to you. These are great questions, everyone. Thank you so much. Okay, if everyone is good here, we can continue on and talk about how we could develop maybe one marketing strategy or a campaign using return on investment as kind of the focus point of that campaign. So these are the steps that we'll use, just very basic steps to create a marketing campaign. And these are from The Accidental Library Marketer by Kathy Dempsey, which is a great resource for people who are kind of just find themselves working in a library and don't have much marketing training, but they're important skills for all of us to have. So as we go through these steps, this is when you'll be using the worksheets that Christine was mentioning earlier, and these PDFs you can download right next to the chat box. So when I work through these steps, I'll kind of go through each step and explain a little bit about it, and then give some examples using the case study that I've provided. So this case study is a fictional library called Bookworm Public Library. So if you haven't looked at the sheet yet, it's basically a small library, but the population is growing pretty quickly. The town's budget hasn't been able to keep up with the growth, and money is really tight. So City Council is considering reallocating some money, but that will leave less for the library because they need that money for other services for the town. So this City Council, it does have an appreciation for some of the services that the library provides, but they don't really understand the value that the library provides to the community. So it'll be our job to come up with a marketing plan that might help to convince them to maintain the library's budget. So our first step in this plan will be to target our audience. And this is a really important part of coming up with any marketing strategy, kind of a broader marketing strategy for your library or a specific campaign. You really want to figure out who your stakeholder groups are, who might have an interest or be vested in some way in what the library does with their money or what the library is providing with the community. And the best way to figure out who your stakeholders are would be to do research and collect data and evidence and figure out what is the most important thing to them. What do they want from your library? So we'll go through and kind of answer these questions. Christine has switched your screen. So if everybody would just go through and maybe think about some different stakeholder groups for your library. And this can be your personal library, or you can use the case study that I've given you. So you could write down who your stakeholder groups are, what you might know about them, and what do they want from the library. And I think it'll be really interesting to see the different stakeholder groups that exist for your libraries. Yes, we have board members or non-library users. Yeah. So if the people on your board are all lawyers, you might have to come up with some ways to talk about them using terms that they might understand. So not library jargon, but maybe some law jargon. Yeah, families with young children. So you have to think about the priorities of parents. Retirees are a big one. Yeah, students, teens, there's younger users. Oh yeah, getting some demographic data about your stakeholder groups or your community in general is a great way to do research. Right, if we're talking about families, they have different priorities because they are bringing their kids with them. So that's just extra things to think about. And yeah, these groups all have really different things that they need from the library. So the way that we promote our services to them are all going to have to be really different. So we could focus on computer use or story times for parents, but we wouldn't focus our story time marketing towards, the retirees or maybe the teens. Meeting space is a big one. And that could be focused towards a lot of different stakeholder groups. There are a lot of people who are looking for meeting space, especially free or cheap meeting space. Oh yeah, genealogy research is a big one. I think that would be a fun kind of marketing strategy to come up with using genealogy research. Or yeah, just using the library as a place to meet people. I know my sister just had a baby and she's been really appreciating going to the library to connect with other new parents. Yeah, fun programs, just something to do that is affordable. Right, and city council members, that'll be a group that we're about to focus on going through these steps. tourists. I think that's a big one in Colorado that maybe some other states don't really have to contend with, that people are going to some ski towns or mountain towns or, wherever they're going in Colorado, that there might be just like a one-use visitor.
And I'm loving that we're really getting like equal information kind of across the board, which means that you guys
Yeah.
know your populations really well. So this is kind of
Yeah, that is great to know that you all have thought about your stakeholder groups and who might be interested in your library and what they want from the library. Oh, I like the from Meg that everybody has a story. They all have their own stories.
yeah. So I think we'll wait just one more moment and then I'll flip back to the slides for you.
All right. Yeah, and these are all great ideas from people about the stakeholder groups and what they want from the library. So I hope that you all have seen that these groups all have really different needs and they all have really different things that they want from the library. Sorry, from Becky. Right, it is important to be able to do a needs assessment of your community. That would be a topic for a whole another CSL in session. But that is the best way that you'll know what your community wants from your library.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and flip back to the slides now.
All right. Yeah, thank you all so much. So as you can see, it's important to do the research about your stakeholder groups and really think about them when you're coming up with your marketing strategies, because it's not really a one-size-fits-all situation for library marketing. So there are a couple of resources to learn more about your audience, to help you target your audience. You could use Pew surveys to get kind of a more general understanding of what people across the country are thinking about their public libraries. To kind of get more specific about some demographic data, you could use your local census information. You could, like we were just talking about, do a needs assessment, survey your own population or your own patrons to see what they want. Going to town hall or city council meetings could give you an insight to the priorities of maybe some of your funding decision makers, like the mayor or the people who are making decisions for your city. And also creating relationships is a really important piece of this. Just to have an insider that you trust that can help you figure out what your target audiences need or what your stakeholder groups need can be really invaluable when you're coming up with marketing campaigns. So in terms of using return on investment as a focus point of a marketing strategy, one audience that this seems to work really well with would be your funding decision makers. So that would be maybe your mayor, your city council, your board, maybe your library director, whoever is making the decisions about what money you get, how much money you get, and how that is being used. So this is where we'll go into our case study. So, what we were talking about with our Bookworm Public Library, what they're trying to do in this scenario is convince that their city council that they should maintain their budget or maybe even get a budget increase if we do a really good job. So our target audience for this will be our city council. And based on the case study that I've given you, what we know about them is that they do have a positive impression of the library's work, but more than that, they want to prioritize not taxing their constituents. And so they might not really fully understand the value of library services. And in this case, we're talking about value in terms of the financial value or the market value that we were talking about before. And what they want from the library is to have the same library services, but to have the library operate on a smaller budget. So our job as we're going through all these steps will be to convince them that we should maintain the library budget and keep it the same because it provides such a great value for the community. So to do this, we're going to describe the library services and the value that they have to the community in terms that your city council will respond to and kind of understand. I think that this is a great thing to keep in mind whenever we're coming up with a marketing strategy or a marketing campaign, and we're reaching out to different stakeholder groups, that we never want to impose our language or our perspective on the groups that we're trying to reach. So what is important to us as librarians might not necessarily be important to our funding decision makers. So it's really important to step outside of the field of librarianship and see things from somebody else's perspective. I was actually just reading the other day a survey. It's kind of old. It came out in 2002. But it's a survey of library directors and how they saw the value of their library within their community versus how public officials and other departments of the local government saw the value of the library. And as you might imagine, there was a huge gap between how the library directors perceived their value and how people in the fire department, the police department, Parks and Rec, how they saw the value of the library. So I think that using return on investment is a good way to kind of bridge that gap and sort of start speaking a common language. So when we're using return on investment to describe our services, the best way to use it would be when your stakeholders are mostly concerned with the market value or the financial value of your library to the community and the financial benefit that your library might provide or that your constituents or patrons or community might get out of the library's presence. Oh, yes, I will post a link to, Curtis asked if we could have access to the survey from 2002. Yeah, I will post that onto the website. I'll post a link to it to the website that Christine has been sending out afterwards. It's a really, really interesting information. So when we're describing our services, it's also a good idea to figure out how your audience processes information the best. So they might be auditory learners, so the best way to reach them might be to get up and give a speech, talk to them about why your library is important and the value that it provides. They could be more visual learners, so they might want to see the graphs or charts, so maybe an infographic would be the best way to reach out to them, something to send around, you know. Or they might be more textual learners, so they might want to get a report from you and have it all laid out for them. So the best way to figure out how your audience learns, I think, would be to create a relationship with somebody who knows your audience well, and then they can help you figure out the best way to present the information that you've gathered. So I thought this was a great example of making an infographic. It's something quick, it's easy to see, it really gets their point across that for every $1 invested, in this case it's Texas, the Texas State Library did this, a study of their state, their communities see a return of $4.64. And this was a great study. It's also a good one to read if you're interested in doing something similar for your community, and I have put that on the website as well. All right, so for looking back to our Bookworm Public Library case study. So in the last step, we have figured out that the most important thing to our city council, our target audience, would be to keep the costs of running the government low, keep those administrative costs down and not raise taxes on their constituents. So if we're going to come up with a way to promote our library from a financial perspective, maybe we've learned that they really like hearing these words like return on investment. They want to know about the value of the library or the financial benefit that our library provides. And they also are really concerned with the tax burden. They don't want to burden their residents. And when we identify what format will work best, let's say that I have gone and created a relationship with somebody on city council and she has told me that her city council, that she knows they respond really well to visual presentations of information. So I've decided that I'm going to make a quick infographic, and that will help them see the return on investment that their community members are getting from the library. All right, so next, we're going to identify the competition to our library. And I think that this is a really hard thing for libraries to do because oftentimes if we're thinking about who is our competition in getting funding, we're put into competition with other departments in the government. And that can be a tricky place because we don't want to put down other departments in order to get money for our libraries, because we don't want to have a Parks and Rec. Yeah, we don't want to have a Parks and Rec library rivalry situation. So I think a good way to think about that would be to think about how we could work with other departments to form partnerships and collaborate with them to save the local government money if that's what they're concerned about, rather than saying you should cut money for this department so that the library can have more. So when I was thinking about this for our case study, we can see that one of our city council's priorities would be to maintain funding for the police department. So if maybe the police department needs extra money for an awareness campaign for young children, and we offer to help collaborate with them on a storytime program so that we can share those resources. Yeah, and maybe the city council is looking to lower their costs of running meetings, so we could offer them free or reduced price meeting space in the library, and then by doing so also create relationships with them and kind of cut down these overlapping services. Or if there's a bookstore, maybe you could work together on a campaign promoting literacy and kind of share the resources that you have there, which would cut down on costs. So it's just a way to think about your competition and how you can overcome that without becoming, I guess, antagonistic towards other departments in your city government. So before I move on, does anybody have other ideas about where there might be overlapping services in your community that you might be able to save the city money through working together or forming partnerships with someone else rather than having them fund two separate departments for the same sort of program? Yeah, so we could work with the Office of Economic Development to kind of, yeah, help spur on growth or maybe jobs in our communities. Or yeah, we're working with organizations that are helping to improve the workforce. Yeah, partnering with bookstores to bring in authors, that could be a good way to promote both the local bookstores and also the library. And also, yeah, Becky said a great way to bring in city council members and sort of develop those relationships. Like Beth said, there's been a great partnership between the state library and the state parks to work together to get people to both their libraries and the parks. Right, yeah, so as we can see, there's kind of a lot of overlap that we could be working with other departments within the city to sort of combine resources and put on the same sorts of programs without spurring on an extra cost to our local government. All right. Whoops. Christine, did you?
I did not.
Did I do something?
I don't think so. Hang on.
Okay.
Bring that back. It'll take me just a minute here.
Okay, thanks.
That's so weird.
And yeah, working with, yeah.
It'll take me just a minute to bring them back, and then I'll forward to where I think you were. So.
All right, thank you. Yeah, sorry about that.
Dun, dun.
So yeah, and the next part of the process that we're going to go through would be to, now we get to like the fun part of, we've done all this research, we really know our stakeholder group. So we're going to work with, yeah, developing some promotional strategies. So this is when we're going to kind of get creative and figure out the best way to get our information to our target audience. So we're going to use the either visual, auditory, or textual format that we've discovered in the last step has worked best with our audience. And we want to come up with just some short and snappy lines, some way to convey your library's value in a way that is very vivid, but also very succinct. Um, and you also want to give context to your numbers, because even people who are kind of more number minded or financially minded, it helps if you can bring those numbers and format them or contextualize them in ways that kind of make it more personal and make more sense to the people that you're trying to reach. So one example would be if we figure out that the total library's return on investment for the community is $2.5 million a year. That's kind of a big and abstract number. It doesn't really mean a lot to a lot of people. But if we lower that down and we can say, so per capita, per person, each taxpayer gets an average of $5 for every $1 of tax money that they've invested into the library, that makes it much more personal to each person who sees that. Another way to do this would be to figure out when a patron gets a total return on their investment. So maybe after they check out 6 or 4 books, they have, that saves them, if we're thinking about $17, maybe is less than 80, in between $70 and $80 when they check out 4 books. So that has given them almost a total return on their investment. Maybe it happens when they book a meeting room or some movies. So just figure out a way that you can say, hey, you've checked out 4 books. This is great. You broke even from the tax money that you've paid to the library. Another way to do this would be to compare the money that library services cost to other things. So maybe it would cost about the same to attend a baseball game as it would to attend a library program or to attend a movie, but the person attending the library program is getting that for free, so they're actually saving money but still getting some value of entertainment. An example I really like would be that some taxpayers in some communities can keep the library running, like per household, for about the cost of a cup of coffee per month, which is something really low and trivial that a lot of people don't think about. Or you can get people to advertise for you on Twitter. So for this person, it's less than $3 a month per household to support their public library. And that's a really, really low payment for your library if you think about how much you pay for your internet and cell phone and your education. Another great strategy if you're working, especially with return on investment, would be and presenting this to people who are sort of more financially minded or work with corporations or work in the business world, would be to show your trends over time, because that's a format that is used very often in business reports or their annual reports. So it's just a format that resonates with a lot of people that they see all the time. All right, so for our case study for Bookworm Public Library, so this is the information that we have gathered in the last 3 steps. So we know our target audience is City Council. We know the format that they like would be an infographic, it's visual. And we know that our message is that our public library is a great investment for the community. So the strategy that we've come up for this campaign would be, if I was going to do this, I might want to make connections with some City Council members and just talk to them, create a relationship so that they're more receptive to understanding the value of the library. I would calculate the per capita return on investment for taxpayers. So in this case, with the numbers that I've provided, that would be, again, a little bit over $4 for every $1 that a taxpayer invests. And then maybe I would ask to just give a short talk at the next City Council meeting and distribute this infographic so that the City Council members have that information. All right, and last but certainly not least in this process, we want to evaluate our marketing strategy or our marketing campaign. Does anybody here who is currently working on a marketing campaign or has done one in the past, do you evaluate your marketing strategies? You can just say yes or no or raise your hand. Yes, Beth, it's very hard. Yeah, I think evaluating a marketing campaign or a marketing strategy is really, really difficult because it's hard to survey people who have seen your marketing. It's hard to know if that has directly caused an increase in library traffic. Um, so Curtis says that they evaluate it in patron satisfaction surveys. That's a great place to do it.
And it's interesting that it's changed over time as to where they want to
Yeah.
kind of see that information.
Yeah, so I think a good way to do it is definitely to kind of sneak that into other surveys because you don't want to cause survey fatigue. So if you kind of can add a question to a survey that you're already handing out or one that's annual, that's a great place to evaluate your marketing. So a couple places you could ask for feedback from the target audience. So if you're doing a campaign that is targeting a fairly small group, like your city council, you could directly ask them if the marketing or the strategy that you used affected them at all in their decision making. If your campaign included a social media aspect, you could measure the analytics and the effectiveness of that. You could measure clicks on your website using Google Analytics, or you could call a focus group. Yeah, so there are a lot of different ways to evaluate it. The most important thing is to just make sure that you're using this information to make educated decisions so that your marketing campaigns continue to improve and become more targeted and really match what your audience will respond to. Yes, so we have a tendency to want to gather data, and as Becky was saying, survey fatigue is pretty prevalent. All right, so if we're talking about our public library case study, I will know if my marketing strategy worked if the city council does maintain the library budget, so maybe it was effective and they really responded to that idea of the library's market value. Or I could ask for feedback from the council members, like I mentioned before. So the information that I might need to improve if I'm trying to use this idea again in a marketing strategy, I might want to do a contingent valuation study and get a broader understanding of the value that my library brings to the community, and maybe localize the market value calculations that I'm using and make my own calculator, or use the Maine State Library calculator and customize it. All right, so going through this case study, it has been very specific towards public libraries. So now I want to think about maybe how this process in creating a marketing campaign focused on return on investment might apply to an academic library or an institutional library, or even maybe how it might apply to different stakeholder groups. How would this change if you were using return on investment to create a marketing campaign that is focused towards your patrons or to parents? So if anybody has any ideas, please go ahead and type them in. I heard a good idea thinking about the idea of that patrons can keep their library running based on the cost of a cup of coffee a month. Somebody suggested that the library could have free coffee the first day of every month, just as a way to say thank you to their patrons. And then also bring up that idea that it's only about $2, $3 a month to keep your library running. Yeah, so Curtis was saying this could be an idea that could be implemented maybe in writing weekly columns. Do many libraries or many people here know if their library contributes a weekly column to their newspaper?
And it's kind of interesting. I was just thinking that if you provided some sort of brief infographic for the board or for city council, you might be able to break down that infographic into smaller bite-sized pieces that might go in a weekly news. Like it might be easily transferable to a different audience. Maybe,
Yeah,
little snippets.
Yeah, and at the state library here, we've been playing with that idea too of We make larger infographics, but then we've been kind of cutting those down into little bits that could be more shareable on social media, or it could be more shareable in a newspaper, just a smaller format. Yeah, talking about this idea in a radio show would be a great idea. It could reach a lot of people that way. Yeah, micrographics. Yeah, I think it is kind of a powerful way to help people see like that they are getting some kind of return on this service, especially if they're using the library a lot. People, especially maybe new parents, instead of buying all those books for their kids, can be getting a great return on investment. All right, well, if anybody else has any ideas, please feel free to keep typing away. So I'll just leave you with a couple of end reminders here. Just constant evaluation. If you're doing, it's a good idea to just kind of work it into your workflow to evaluate the needs of your community, the needs of different stakeholder groups, and also to evaluate your marketing strategies to make sure that you are working with the best information and providing the best targeted marketing that you can. I would say don't wait for a crisis to be working through some of these marketing campaigns. It's good to maintain relationships and contacts throughout the year, not just every time that you're up for an election or when you want a mill levy passed, because then you kind of already have the foundation to build upon to promote your libraries and the value that they bring to your community. And always, always keep your audience in mind, keep your target audience in mind when you're developing these plans for your library, and make sure that you're speaking their language. You're not coming at your library promotion from a librarian mindset. Make sure that you're coming at it with your audience and their mindset and what they want and need from the library in your head. So here's a couple of actionable items that you could do if you think that using return on an investment would be a good idea or something that would be useful for your library. You can make a new contact with somebody who's a funding decision maker, contact your municipal government or your treasury, or look through their website to see if you could find out exactly how much tax money per person goes to the library. This month, if you have time, you could download a calculator and customize it to use your own library's information. And if you think it would work for you this year, you could develop a new marketing campaign using return on investment as kind of a focus point. So as you all look through these, does anybody have any final questions for me? Right, and here are some sources if you want to go back and look later. All right, and if you do have any questions or you think of anything later, please feel free to contact me. I'm here to help everybody, so I would love to talk about it. Yeah, Meg, I think it kind of differs for each community. So I think for Denver, it would be the Treasury or the Treasurer's office would help. I think for it might be different from community to community. So, all right, and if you could all, yes, please fill out this survey so I can help me evaluate myself for my constant evaluation of my presentations. I would really appreciate it.
Uh-oh.
Oh no.
Let me try. Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Oh. Yikes. That's weird.
Oh no. Huh.
Well, then you can
let me look at that really.
We'll just give Miranda a round of applause. While Miranda's looking into that link, just really briefly as we wrap up today, and thanks for everybody's participation and feedback. It was a really interesting session. I just wanted to let everybody know that our next CSL in session, we're actually trying something new. We're going to do one on Monday, December 4th at 3:45. It's a brand new breed of CSL in session called Promising Practices. And the session is Collaboration. It Can Be Learned, a Recipe for Success. We also will have a more regular CSL in session scheduled for December 13th when we're talking about eliminating fines and fees. The archive for today's session, will, as well as all of the resources that Miranda was talking about, will be available on the CSL in session website probably within the next hour. And if anybody needs a certificate for today's session, I'm going to type my name into not my name, my email address into the chat area, and you can email me directly and I can give you a certificate.
Okay, the link should be working now. I'll post it again.
Oops.
Ah, good. Yay. Luckily, you have the person who runs the surveys here giving your presentation.
And everybody wants to fill out the survey. Yay.
Yay.
Well, thank you.
All right, everyone, again, thank you all so much for coming.
Thanks, everybody, again, and we will see you guys online at another time.